And I think it is really a good time to address the topic of this presentation. And well, Yale as a great school is up to the topic, and I think this week is dedicated to Ukraine in Yale. The day before yesterday, there was an excellent presentation, a lecture by the political science professor David Cameron on the political and historical framework of the events in Ukraine. Yesterday, there was a huge panel discussion which discussed the military, economical, and energy aspects of the Ukrainian events. And I think now it's a good time to discuss the theological aspects of the events in Ukraine. And I believe that this aspect is not less important than energy, military, security, and whatever aspect of the events. And I believe that a theology can provide a kind of hermeneutical key to understanding what was going on in Ukraine, what is happening in Ukraine right now, and what will happen to Ukraine. Without this theological aspect, without taking into consideration the role of the churches, I think any discussion, any analysis of the Ukrainian situation will be incomplete. I'm going to talk first to present some thoughts of mine, and then I will show you some pictures for the dessert. So the main course is essentially about the role of the churches, of the Ukrainian churches, in the at the preliminary phase of the protests in Ukraine that started in November last year. How the churches got involved in the protests, how they reacted, how they supported or rejected what was going on the Maidan, and what can be the role of the church in what will follow up the developments in Ukraine. I will start my presentation with a story. This story has been told by the Ukrainian blogger Olesya Mamchich, a mother of two kids of 8 and 3 years. And this story is about her husband. And this is one of a zillion of stories which have been told in the Ukrainian media and worldwide, which describe in many voices the situation in Ukraine. And I think this story is quite relevant, and it's a kind of, uncoding the rationale of the events. So the story is like this. A full bus of the Berkut is the riot police, which became famous for its brutality towards the protesters, attacked our blue bus, mark of car, probably don't know it, and driven by Sashko. Sashko is the husband of this lady. He was pulled out of the car, put on the ground, and beaten. Later on, together with others, he was brought somewhere nearby. I suspect the Mariinsky Park, it's a park near the park in Kiev. There was snow was falling. The earth was in the blood. They released two girls on their way, while they took the boys out there. Sashko had a wonderful grandfather's army coat, our family heirloom. We did not see the coat anymore, but it doesn't matter. They laid the boys in the sweaters on the -20 degrees Celsius. I don't know how it is in Fahrenheit, but still it's very cold. On the ground, and some put on their knees. They held them thus for up to 2 hours. Something human awakened in their soul, because on the halfway they threw on Sashko's shoulders someone else's jacket. While Sashko was on his knees in the snow, the Berkut man conducted a lesson of political information, telling their point of view on the Maidan. In particular, they were extremely interested in how much we were paid. Well, at least 200 hryvnias is approximately $20 US, is for sure. They were not convinced that we were not paid. And the final touch. They required from Sashko to say, "Glory be to the Berkut." My husband replied, "Glory be to everyone who has not lost conscience." story, I think, reveals the core of the civil strife, which became incarnate in the Maidan. People on the one side of the given barricades firmly believed that social activity could be only a simulation stimulated with money, fear, or power. On the other side of the barricades, people stood with resolve to die in hope that there are things that matter much more than money, comfort, health, and the very life. They summarized all these values in the words conscience and dignity. In essence, the Maidan was all about dignity. It was rightly branded as the Maidan of dignity. In the system of the political coordinates, which dominated in Ukraine in the last years, such words as dignity, justice, and democracy were just words. The reality behind these words was opposite to their original meaning. Dignity, justice, and democracy in this system of coordinates were imitational, not real. I call this a semantic shift, when the words from the political lingua franca effectively function like homonyms when applied to the post-Soviet socio-political realities. In fact, these realities can be better described by their antonyms. What is called democracy is in fact authoritarianism. What is called justice is a complete corruption of the judicial system. Anti-fascism suspiciously resembles fascism, etc. This system has prevailed in the majority of the former Soviet republics after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The post-Soviet socio-political system is in some sense eclectic. On the one hand, it features elements of the old communist ideology and of the Soviet political traditions, and on the other hand, it has adopted many elements of the Western political systems and capitalism. Its modern nature was probably best described by the modern Russian writer Viktor Pelevin, who is believed to be able to decode this post-Soviet, decipher this post-Soviet mentality. In his novels Generation E, its English title, as we translated into English, is Homo, Sapiens, and Babylon, and Snuff. If you have a chance to read them, well, I advise you to read them. They will reveal a lot about the real motifs of the post-Soviet mentality. However, the eclecticism of the post-Soviet political model does not mean that this model is temporary or transitory. It has been ossified and became a self-sufficient structure. It is probably not post-Soviet anymore, but neo-Soviet, a term to a complete imagined community, to use the words of Benedict Anderson. And this imagined community not nationalist only. It is much more than just a nationalist imagined community. It is an imagined community which operates such as a civilization, as as a fire. Recently, this system has been endowed with an ideology which expresses itself in the religious terms and resembles a civil religion, as Robert Bellah described it. Actually, I believe that the whole concept of the American civil religion, which was so well investigated, researched by Robert Bellah and his followers, is a key to understand what is going on in Russia nowadays, or in the post-Soviet space, so to say. Because what we are facing now in that part of the world is exactly a creation of a new civil religion with the elements of the pre-revolutionary Tsarist ideology, like monarchy, orthodoxy, and peopleness. Православие, самодержавие, народность is a part of this civil religion. It has also embraced some elements of the Soviet communist ideology. That's why there is a strange combination of two saints of this new civil religion. For instance, Stalin and Tsar Nicholas II, who is murdered. And they are, in the same immunologium of this civil religion, quite surprisingly. And another surprise is that some elements of Christianity are also included in this civil religion. And they constitute a strange combination of which functions like an ideology as a religious ideology in a sense, as it was described by Bella and others. So I think that people who came to the Maidan, they protested not just personally against Yanukovych and his family and so forth, but protested about the tendency towards to this system, to the model which Yanukovych started imposing on Ukraine and perverted in Ukraine. And this was exactly a protest against this neo-Soviet socio-political model. That's why the protests were essentially anti-Soviet, or better to say, anti-neo-Soviet. Symbolical in this regard is that the protesters took care to pull down as many monuments of Lenin as they could. At the core of the social conflict that the Maidan embodied was not so much a tension between the pro-Western and pro-Russian orientation of the country, as it was sometimes misleadingly represented by media, by the Western media, but the tension between those who are against and those who are for the new Soviet model of development of the Ukrainian nation. This was in fact a conflict between two perceptions of citizenship. The one, which inclines to the Soviet style of paternalism, and the other, that values personal responsibility and dignity of the human person. Speaking about the moral strength of the Maidan, one cannot avoid addressing the issue of violence there, given that this issue has been discussed and raised in the Western media quite substantially. And this particularly relates to the activities of the far-right groups. Well, I should say that originally the Ukrainian protests were non-violent. The Maidan was, I would say, a collective Gandhi that abstained from any violence. And actually Maidan would stop the next day after it gathered on the 1st of December, gathered the next day after the students were beaten on the 30th of November. And, well, actually my niece was among those students, but she escaped being beaten. She just found a shelter. So it was a kind of thing which brought and they could overthrow the regime just within one day if they applied some violence, and they did. That's why Maidan actually continued for so long that people had to sacrifice so many lives in order exactly to remain non-violent. That was the price for being non-violent that the people of Maidan paid. Dictatorship laws were adopted by the parliament on the 16th of January this year. Well, they were adopted actually only by the Kharkov region, the ruling party at the time of the Communist Party. The protesters did not have any other chance but to resist, because that meant that many hundreds of people would end up in jail. They would be beaten, they would be kidnapped and so forth. So the people didn't have any other option but to resist. And well, I should admit that this happened also because of now notorious inefficiency of the EU and well, US leadership at the time to address the issues of the Maidan. And this radicalized some parts of the Maidan, and those parts of the Maidan actually became violent. In this later stage of the protests, the young activists from the far right and leftist movements demonstrated some excessive violence. That's true. Some of them, however, were provocateurs engaged by the regimes, and the regime just paid people to, to provocate violence and to provocate violent reactions from the protests. Some were youngsters who looked for adventure, 18, 19 years old young boys and girls. They just want, more active participation. And some were people overwhelmed by the desire of revenge after the snipers shot down dozens of the protesters. That was the most really violent phase of the Maidan. So this radicals group, however, did not express the dominating mood of the Maidan's majority, and the core of the Maidan remained peaceful and faithful to its initial values. And the churches played an important role in preserving the peaceful character of the Maidan. People came to the Maidan because of the numerous abuses of the political regime, by the political regime, but they also felt that the regime violated something essentially human. Therefore, they protested against its brutal inhumanity, and the quest of the Maidan was largely a quest about humanity. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to value human dignity? So it was really deeply rooted. I mean, it was really a religious and anthropological issue which was at stake of the protests. And the language of dignity, which the Maidan adopted, and I will show you some pictures of this language, became to a great extent religious. People who came to the Maidan appealed to God's justice. They demanded the authorities to act in accordance with the commandments of God. During all 3 months of the protests, the people on the Maidan began and ended their day with prayers. And those were probably one of the most massive, prayer events in Europe in our days, when tens of thousands of people kneeled simultaneously and prayed together. Well, it was really it was -10, -20 Celsius degrees frost. They kneeled on the frozen stones. It was a kind of asceticism, I would say. Thus, the Maidan, part of being a political and social event, also became a religious phenomenon. And without considering this phenomenon, this aspect of the protests, any description or analysis of the Ukrainian protests would be incomplete and even irrelevant. The role of the Ukrainian churches in the protests, thus, was not marginal, but central. It was characteristic more of the pre-modern social society than a secularized one. This role was reflected in the still highly religious character of the Ukrainian people, who have high expectations from their churches and are attentive to their voices, the voices of the churches. Well, speaking of the Ukrainian churches, I mean the 3 main Orthodox churches. The largest one is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in communion with the Moscow Patriarchate, with over 12,000 communities. And this is the only Ukrainian church recognized by the Fellowship of the Orthodox Churches worldwide. The second largest church is the Kievan Patriarchate of Kiev, which was founded in 1992 and is not recognized by the rest of the Orthodox churches. And the smallest one is the Ukrainian Autocephalous Church, which originates from the Autocephalous movement that started in 1918, was brought here with immigration after in the war period in the US and in Canada, and then returned back to Ukraine after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And there is also a Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. It's a Catholic church sui juris, which follows the Eastern Rite. Well, I should say that the Ukrainian churches in the beginning of the protests were not up to the expectations of the awakening civil society. The Maidan articulated and enacted a moral code that the Ukrainian churches were supposed to uphold, but failed to do so during the formation of the political regime of Yanukovych. All of them were more or less collaborating with the regime. All of them also got infected with many social diseases common in the neo-Soviet societies. Should skip some chunks of the presentation. So, however, during the 3 months of the protests, the Ukrainian churches matured in their stand vis-à-vis the social and moral issues that the Maidan attempted to resolve. They appreciated the non-violent character of the protests and enhanced this character of the Maidan. They gradually supported the moral agenda of the protesters and gave them theological legitimacy. They also re-evaluated their relationship with the state. If we present the relations of the churches with the state, the church and the state, with a triangle where at the angles of this triangle are the church, the society, and the state. Traditionally, in the Eastern Christian tradition, but it was also the case largely in the Western tradition as well, that the churches aligned mostly with the state, not with the society. This means when the society was somehow emancipated itself from the state, the churches faced a dilemma to stay with the state or to align with the society. And this was exactly a doomsday for the Ukrainian churches to make their choice, either to remain, to stay with the state, which became extremely oppressive towards the society, or to realign themselves with the society which emerged out of the state, from the shadow of the state somehow. And what Maidan did actually, it created a framework for the churches to realign with the society, to emancipate from the state. And this happened to all the churches in Ukraine. This is an amazing thing that happened to the churches. And they actually gratefully rewarded the Maidan with their support for facilitating, for pushing the churches towards considering more the demands and needs of the society. The churches also can help further the awakening civil society. And this is an excellent opportunity for them to show their strength, their potentiality of an important and powerful institutions capable of transforming the society. Particularly, the churches need to address the syndromes, post-totalitarian syndromes from which our society suffers. These syndromes cannot be healed without a deep, I believe, de-Sovietization of these societies, post-Soviet societies. Civil society in the countries like Ukraine, can get mature only if the majority of the people get rid of the Soviet-style paternalism, assume a full responsibility for their future, value their freedom, and learn to use this freedom responsibly. So it's the question of healing the Ukrainian society, of the lasting transformation of the society, is essentially a question of overcoming the Soviet-style paternalism and assuming a new model of relationship with the state or the people, a relationship which values the freedom and civil responsibility of people. In some sense, the people who want to be different, who want to institute a different society, need to refuse the services of their great inquisitors. The inquisitor in Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov is a typical ruler of a new Soviet state, who takes from his subjects the burden of freedom, regardless of whether they want it or not. The majority of the post-Soviet people, however, feel happy when they are paternalized by the state. And the churches in Ukraine and other post-Soviet countries should clearly state that the refusal of freedom is sin, just as greed or pride, because it is something contrary to the creation of God, how God created man, as free beings with a risk to say no. And the problem with the post-Soviet states is that they want to minimize a possibility of people to say no, and they use this as a pretext to establish their full control upon the people. So the churches, with their potentiality, with their evaluation, theological evaluation of the human nature as it is intended by God, can become a school which teaches their members to exercise their freedom through developing relationship with God and the neighbor. This makes the churches indispensable in addressing the social issues pertinent to the post-Soviet Union, because they can hit the core of these issues, the fear and the refusal to exercise freedom, though to exercise it responsibly. Well, that's what I wanted to say. Now I'd like to show you some pictures to illustrate what I've just said, and then we could have questions and Q&As. So this is how actually the Maidan started. It started with the students being beaten on the 30th of November. This is an internet map actually. It's a design picture, but it became extremely popular after the students were beaten and became a symbol of the first phase of the resistance. So crowds of people, really over 1 million people, according to some estimations, came to the Maidan to protest against that beating of the students. This is one of the earliest pictures in early December. That's another in the night. So people stood in the night, and actually it was really, really cold. It was -10, -15. I attempted to stand there for about 2 hours and was really dead, frozen to bones, basically. And people stood there, for months in the cold. Yeah, so you see it now. How people reacted to how they protested, how they expressed their protest. They often alluded to the religious symbols. So this is one of them. Yeah. You see, this is a part of a piece of the Bible, so and this is how people prayed during the protests. This is another picture of mass prayer. People just kneel on the road, on the stones. And this is a prayer tent. They immediately established, set up on the Maidan, so they could come and pray there. Because it wouldn't be a prayer tent. Well, that was quite a common picture of the Maidan. This is a priest wearing his vestments and present there. Well, that's what I said. The Maidan initially was a kind of collective Gandhi. It was really peaceful, and there are some pictures that indicate this peaceful character of the protests. This one, the next one. It's interesting that this was quite common. You see, this is an inscription which says, God is with us. So this rhetoric, religious rhetoric, references to God, was spread everywhere on the Maidan. Well, that's how people felt. That's another iconic picture, probably you've seen it. So this is one of the fascists and extremists in description of Mr. Putin that actually participated in the protests. So you see the fascist. Absolutely. There is another fascist lady. It's a ballroom which was used by the protesters to just to stay, to sleep, to have some rest. Well, people try to approach riot police, and to show their disability. This girl just tried to embrace the policeman. Well, or just begged police, to stop, to apply any violence, and it didn't work. Police just took some people, protesters, and led them to torture. And this is an interesting picture because you see this lady, she tries to protect this guy who was taken by police, and she tries to protect him with the cross. And this is another picture, another fascist. This is actually a professor of the Yale University, Technological University, a famous professor, with his son, who were taken by police and beaten, and you see their condition. Well, another extremist, this time a reporter from Reuters. So actually people really had to defend themselves, and that's how the active phase of the protests, the violent phase of the protest started. This is one of the pictures that reflects very well the mood that changed, how it changed in this second phase of the protests. People just stood face to face with the police. And actually the church was there. And there is a huge number of pictures, of iconic pictures that demonstrate the way that the church tried to pacify the protests. Priests were standing in between the protesters and the police, were among the protesters. So the church was visible everywhere. It was an essential and intrinsic part of the whole story. And this is one of the pictures that indicate this. These are actually the monks from the Lavra monastery, the Kievo-Pecherska Lavra. The same group of priests. Well, you see, the priest just took confessions just on the barricades, and this is one of the pictures. And it was not only the Orthodox priests or the Catholic priests, but also you see this Lutheran pastor who was standing and protecting people from the riot police. Well, priests tried to approach police, and try to this priest tried to kind of to confess the police man in order to bring him back to some kind of conscience. And this is interesting. This is a motto which says Vox Populi, Vox Dei, and it exactly expresses very well the moods of the people who came. Well, actually, negotiations or embracements, or playing piano didn't help, and the Maidan or the mediation of the church didn't help, and the Maidan came to a very violent pace, and this is one of the pictures about it. police. And still, the church was there, just in the middle of the fight. Like this. In order to survive, one had to wear this helmet. It didn't help often because the snipers could even shoot. Some snipers, they just played kind of. There was a sniper who liked to shoot people in their left eye. So they had some kind of signature, playful signature, which was a play with death, essentially. The church also offered shelter. This is the Mikhailovsky monastery. You see that there is a service going on there in the middle of the church, and people were just laying and having some rest, and actually some of them they were saved by being in the church, because the riot police, they tried to rush to the church, but stopped eventually and didn't proceed. The churches also were used for hospitals, like this one. Or this one. See, this is just in the church itself, under the icons. Well, it didn't help always. This is one of the victims of the snipers. And over 100 were killed like this. Well, that's how the snipers work. They just shoot the people. The technique they applied was to shoot the person into the head and then into the neck. Actually, there was no chance to survive. Those are some of the victims. Those who were shot down. Well, this is the monument, kind of laying flowers to the so-called the Heavenly 100. There was a name invented to indicate those who died, the Heavenly 100. And this is a picture which shows that what the Maidan was all about. It was about being human. It was about to remain human under any circumstances. It was about human dignity. It was the Maidan of the dignity. And the church was in there, was supporting this cause, and was providing its own outlook, its own vision of what humanity is, what human dignity is. And it has been appreciated a lot by the protesters. Thank you for your attention. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Cyril, for a very moving presentation. We have a few moments then for questions, feedback. Open up the floor. Comments, responses, questions?
I'm from Kyiv originally. My mother and my sister-in-law participated actively at Maidan by bringing food and medical supplies to Maidan. And I personally, at home, we watched a live television of Maidan every day since about November. One thing I wanted to add is that, like at the end, when everyone paid so much attention to Maidan and what's happening, but at that time, Maidan was already violent, and one of the things that is, people for a long time, as you said, that they were very peaceful. It was all about it was peaceful protest. There was nothing about violence, and for a long time, because of so much persecution from the police and so much abuse and people kidnapped, and there were over 70 reporters and journalists hurt. People had to protect themselves, and that was why protesters had to be equipped with like helmets, and things like that. And if you look at human being, there's so much you can take, from standing there peacefully in the cold, being abused by your government, being your friends disappear, your friends die, being found dead in the forest, then there's another type of human like yourself is in you that there is like, you see that like you're so powerless that you have to go and fight. You have to go and fight. Because you know that if you don't, then, you have to get a result, the blood has to be shed, I feel like. There was the day when the 20th of February, about 100 people died on Maidan. That was the break point, when our president left the country, when people came back, our politicians came back and started finally voting and resolving the issue. Before that, it was just kind of not moving anywhere. Thank you for your presentation.
That's exactly what I would also support, and you're absolutely right. It was amazing how people really resisted any provocation towards violence. They were constantly followed by gangs, employed gangs to react violently, and they didn't. And it was really, they made a point. And they didn't always realize how important it was. Yes, well, they were just ordinary people from everyday life. They were clerks, taxi drivers, whatever. And they couldn't even articulate what they felt, why they were standing, what they were standing for, even to themselves. They just felt that it is right. And it was right.
Well, I participated in Orange Revolution back in 2004. I came after college. I would go every day, wearing like orange coat and standing there. It is amazing when you're standing in that Maidan. Some of the pictures you showed when they're kneeling, it was probably pictures from the very early morning, and you could see it's not very crowded. You see like people can walk through. But in the middle of the day, if you're going to Maidan, it's literally like you cannot move. You can barely turn around because it's just so dense with people. It's packed. And there's this amazing feeling that I have experienced. It was like experience some spirit. It was spirit of nation. It's like you're getting goosebumps. You're getting out there, and there's so many of your people who, and the mood is incredibly optimistic, incredibly friendly, incredibly like promising. People like full of faith and promise, And then back when it was happening in Maidan in 2004, and this kind of gatherings, it's hard to comprehend when you just watch it from outside. It's hard to understand why people are standing there in the cold. They do not feel that cold because what's in their hearts, like some of them came there out of despair. Like my father has experienced so much pressure and persecution just because he was a regular businessman trying to support his family, and he was taken. Like it is incredible how much bribery there is like in Ukraine and like countries like Ukraine, and so people come to such things out of despair, they have nothing else to lose, and when they come out there, they have this hope that they are fighting if they can at least they can show that they do not agree with what's happening.
Yeah. I think many images can be applied to the Maidan. I think one of the images that can be better understood in this context is probably the image of a peaceable kingdom. It was a kind of a community of people who have developed a very strong feeling of community being of togetherness. And one of the things that united them was exactly this feeling necessity of being peaceable.
Even thinking about your triangle image of church, society, and state, I can't help but be moved by just the role of the baptized. That the Maidan was the church in place. We have different ecclesiologies thinking here, but how would you comment on that? Well, we've got church leadership, but you've also got the community of the baptized. wasn't that the church there.
I would definitely define Maidan as an ecumenical event.
Ecumenical.
When people in the churches that, well, usually didn't speak to each other often, on other occasions, their common cause brought them together, and they actually overcame somehow the differences that they had before. And, well, definitely it was an ecumenical phenomenon. And according to the moral code that the Maidan enacted, well, it was not far from of a community with some religious, moral principles which they shared.
Time for another question or two. Any else? Well, please join me in thanking Father Cyril once again. Just us to coffee or dessert.